At the end of December 1992, Jim and Jennifer Stolpa were a normal young American family. Jim was 20, a junior enlisted soldier in the U.S. Army. Jennifer was 21. They lived in Castro Valley, California, with their 5-month-old son, Clayton. On December 29th, they got bad news. Jennifer's grandmother had died in Idaho. They didn't want to miss the funeral. Money was tight, time was short, so they decided to drive there by car. Looking at the map, they chose what looked like a shorter back-road route through northern Nevada instead of staying on the main interstate highways. They packed their 1988 Dodge Dakota with only the basics: some snacks like chips and candy, a few bottles of water, warm clothes, and baby supplies for Clayton. There were winter storm warnings, but they thought it would just be a tough winter drive, a few hours on the road. Near the California-Nevada border, they turned onto a remote secondary road in the high desert of Washoe County, not far from the tiny community of Via. It was open country with long, empty stretches, a few ranches, and almost no traffic. Around midday, the weather changed fast. Snow started to fall harder, the wind picked up. The sky turned gray and heavy. Soon they were driving in a near whiteout. The road disappeared under fresh snow. Visibility dropped to just a few yards in front of the truck. The temperature fell below 32 degrees Fahrenheit and kept dropping toward the teens and single digits. Eventually, the Dodge hit a deep snowdrift and stopped. Spinning the tires just dug the truck in deeper. They were stuck. This was 1992. They had no cell phone, no satellite device, no radio. Nobody at home knew they had taken this shortcut. They were alone, in the middle of a winter storm, on a forgotten back road. Their first reaction was simple: stay in the truck and try to ride out the storm. Jim started the engine from time to time and ran the heater, trying to save as much fuel as possible. Even with the heater, the cold slowly pushed its way into the cab. Outside, the temperature kept dropping, heading toward the low teens and even close to 0 degrees Fahrenheit at night. Their small pile of food, chips, candy, a few chocolate bars, disappeared quickly. For water, they scooped snow into bottles and melted it using the last warmth from the engine and their own body heat. Clayton's lifeline was his mother. Jennifer kept breastfeeding him. While she and Jim were already cutting their own intake almost to nothing, Clayton still had warm milk and fluids. Her body was burning through its own reserves just to keep him alive. As the fuel gauge sank toward empty, they started to run out of ways to stay warm. To fight the cold, they began burning anything they could spare: papers from the glove box, bits of cloth, anything that would burn. At one point, Jim even took one of the truck's tires and burned it outside. The thick smoke made them cough and gave them headaches, but without some kind of fire, in that cold, they knew they might not make it through the night. The truck was slowly being buried in snow. The food was gone. Both adults were getting weaker. The Dakota had turned into a freezing metal box that barely kept out the wind, especially when outside nighttime temperatures dropped to around 10 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit out in the open. Around the fourth day, they decided they needed a different kind of shelter. Using a shovel in their bare hands, Jim and Jennifer dug a snow cave right next to the truck and moved in. The snow became their walls and roof. It blocked the wind and trapped body heat. Inside the cave, it was cramped and dark, but clearly warmer than the dead truck and the open air. They laid down the floor mats and extra clothing and made a small nest for the baby. Jennifer kept Clayton pressed against her chest almost all the time, feeding him and sharing what little warmth she still had. She herself was eating almost nothing and losing weight fast, but as long as her milk continued, he had a real chance. Several more days passed like this. Jim and Jennifer were exhausted and thin. Simple movements took real effort. To keep from giving in to panic, they talked, prayed, and focused on their son instead of on how bad the situation was. But the facts were simple. No one knew where they were. No vehicles had come down that road, and just waiting for rescue was becoming less and less realistic. Jim kept coming back to one idea. Their only real chance was for him to leave the snow cave and try to reach a highway on foot. He was not dressed for a long winter march. He had light boots without thick socks, jeans, a jacket, and gloves. Clothes for a normal winter drive, not for a multi-day walk in deep snow. Outside, the temperature was well below freezing, hovering around 0 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and even colder with the wind. In some places, the snowdrifts reached his waist. The wind pushed him sideways and knocked him down. He fell, got back up, and kept moving. He grabbed handfuls of snow to fight thirst. As the hours passed, his feet went from cold to numb to almost dead weight. It was the kind of cold that leads to deep frostbite. His mind started to play tricks on him. He saw shapes and lights that were not really there. But he kept walking toward where he believed US Highway 95 had to be. That night, with no shelter in sight, he dug a small hole in the snow and spent the night there, trying to stay alive until morning. By the next day, he could barely move, but he forced himself to stand up and walk again. In about 2 days, Jim covered roughly 50 miles of snow-covered country and finally reached US Highway 95. A truck driver named David Peterson saw a lone figure by the road and pulled over. Jim could barely speak, but he managed to say that his wife and baby were still trapped in the snow and showed on a map where they had left the road. Peterson drove him to the nearest town and alerted the authorities. The response came quickly. The Washoe County Sheriff's Department sent out helicopters and snowmobiles into the search area. On January 6, 1993, rescuers found the snow cave near Via. Inside were Jennifer and baby Clayton, alive but right on the edge. Both showed severe effects of cold, dehydration, and exhaustion. Jennifer was still holding her son against her body, trying to keep him warm with the last strength she had. All three were flown to a hospital in Reno. Doctors managed to stabilize them and bring them back slowly. Clayton had lost weight, but survived without lasting damage. Jennifer recovered with time and care. Jim's feet, however, had suffered deep frostbite during his march. Several toes had to be amputated. It was the price he paid for walking out into the storm, and the reason his wife and son were still alive.